Hello and welcome to another Procreate tutorial where today I'm going to teach you how to make this clownfish reef design. Now as always there's links to the palette in the description down below. All the brushes that I use are built into Procreate so you don't need any additional brushes. The other thing you'll need is the super handy stencil guide that I've added as well. So check out the requirements down below for everything including the canvas size. If you like the video, make sure to drop a like down below, and if you want even more tutorials from me, I post 3 more every single month to a catalogue of over 80 at the time of recording to my Patreon supporters. I'll throw up the latest 3 on the screen now. If you want to come and support me over on Patreon, I'll leave a link in the description down below. And enjoy the tutorial. It's a bit of a longer one, but have some fun with it. And with all that said, let's get started. So once you've created your canvas and you've added in this guide that I've provided, and to do that, you'll just need to make sure you go up to actions and you go to the option of add. And then if you go to the option here of insert a photo, you'll be able to add this on a new layer. And I've added it here and I've called it guide so you can just see in my layers throughout the whole of the tutorial it at the very top. So we're going to go ahead first of all and we're going to go to our background color in our layers and we're going to change it to this color here. It's the middle color in that far right column. We're then going to hit done. And we're going to get started first of all with adding in some of the elements right at the very front, and then we'll make our way somewhat backwards. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new layer. We're going to make sure it's always underneath our guide. So our guide sits at the top, and you can always go to your guide, tap on it and just lower the opacity down, maybe down to about sort of 30% so you can just about see it on screen, but you can keep yours at whatever level you're happy with. Now throughout the whole of this tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and create sort of 2 layers every single time for a group. Swipe from left to right on both of them and group them together, just so things are organized because we've got lots of sort of layers going backwards. So I'm going to rename this group and I'm just going to call it group number 1. And if we all do the same, you'll know what group I'm referring to. So in group number 1, the bottom layer out of the 2, we're going to go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here in the bottom right of the palette somewhat. So it's the bottom of the second column from the right. We're going to go to our brush. And the brush of choice for today is going to be under inking. It's going to be the dry ink brush. And I've got the size set to 10% and opacity set to 100%. And if you see this line here, it's just essentially like a bit of a rock over here. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a bit of a line. You can see I'm not trying to keep it nice and smooth or anything. And then I'm going to drag and drop the color in. And if you get a bit of a fuzzy line, just go back over and adjust it. Now throughout the whole of this tutorial, we're using this brush. And you can see if I press really lightly, it's a very thin line. If I press really firm, I'll get a nice thick line. So a lot of the time I'm going to be using quite sort of a firm pressure, and then after that we'll just occasionally use it in a lighter tone here and there. We're then going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the top color in that second column from the right. We're going to go back to our layers and we're going to go up to the other empty layer in this group, and we're going to create a bit of an outline for this. So we're going to go ahead and just follow this edge here all the way up to the top. And then I'm just going to create lots of little sort of small flicks down like this, sort of rotating round on themselves. A little something like this. It's just meant to be a little bit of fun in this sort of area over here. Nothing too intense. And then once you've done that, we're then going to go back down to layer number 2. We're going to tap on it and we're going to go ahead and alpha lock it. So we can't paint outside of what we've already painted. And then we're going to switch to the other brush that I'm primarily going to use, which is airbrushing and the soft brush. And once we've got that soft brush, probably around about sort of 8%, we're going to press very, very lightly and just create a bit of a gradient. Now, don't worry if your lines above start to sort of blend out. We'll come back and adjust them in a second. You just want to create this light sort of gradient here. I'm just going to punch that out a little bit more towards the top and just let that fade down. And then we're going to go back to the layer above. We're going to change the blend mode from normal. We're going to change it to add. And we're going to bring that opacity down to around about sort of 50%. So we end up with a little something like this. And that is that group done. Now what you can do is if you go to your layers, you can at this point tap on group 1 and flatten it down. It's totally up to you if you've got the layers to carry on. You can always come back to it and compress it down later on. We're going to create another 2 layers. We're going to swipe from left to right on both of those, group them together, and we're going to rename this group, tap on it, rename it, and call it group number 2. If we then grab group number 2, so I've just collapsed it down and drag it underneath number 1. So we're going to go ahead and open up group number 2. We're going to go to the bottom layer in group number 2, and we're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here, the top of the 6th column, and we're going to go back to our brushes. Now I've gone right to the very top and gone to the recent section, which shows you the latest brushes that you've used. And we're just going to jump between the 2 because we're going to use the dry ink and the soft brush quite a lot. So we're going to use the dry ink brush here at the very top. Otherwise it's under inking. And we've got this space over here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create some really fun areas of coral. So we're going to start off using that as a guide. We're going to be down here at the bottom, and we're just going to create some nice fun sort of very thin lines that then have a nice sort of thick line on the top, and then sort of just curve around on themselves, maybe a little something like this, and get a little bit thinner. We can then go ahead and sort of work off of this and just continue to make our way upwards, and you can create some fun sort of nice random squiggly lines. I've gone all the way round under here. I'm then going to go ahead and create another one that's like starts off very thin, and then I'm pressing quite firm here. Again, I'm at the 10% mark. And then you can start to vary up your shapes, because sometimes they start to have this sort of like they come outwards on themselves like this and have this beautiful sort of little shape to them. You can stop at any point such as here and then just create some additional sort of smaller ones, and maybe we can create another one here, for example, that just makes its way off to the right. And then I'm going to sort of prioritize the right hand side first. So starting here, I'm just going to create like a little bit more of a curve and a bit of a wobble on the top of them. And I love these ones that sort of balloon outwards almost, so like this. And then we're just going to continue making our way up. So again, I'm going to prioritize the right hand side first, just as sort of a stacking system. You can create totally different shapes each time. You can let them just sort of fall underneath each other like here. It's totally up to you. I'm going to create another one, a bit more pointy edge to it. That one almost looks like a set of lips. We'll then create another one, and then this one can just run in behind. Again, varying up sort of how they stack on top of each other will look really, really cool. Let's create another one at the top here, a little bit of a wobble, and then maybe just one that just sort of makes its way in from the side up here. Down here, you can take a look, just maybe think about, just can you squeeze in a tiny, tiny one here, for example, just in that space. And that's all we need to do here. Now we're going to go ahead and fill all this in. So we're going to go to our colors first of all, and we're going to grab this color here, the middle color in the 6th column. What we then need to go ahead and do is if we go to our layers, we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. And then the lines that we've just drawn, we're just going to drag them above that empty layer. So you should have an empty layer underneath your lines. And this is the layer we want to be on. And we're using the dry ink again. What we're going to do is we're just going to be nice and sort of easy with this. We're just going to fill in the inside line here up against the edge. So just up against this edge here, we're going to make sure we go right from the edge of the canvas up here. And we're going to follow all the way down. Now, if you make any mistakes, just jump to your eraser in a second and just clear out any bits at the end that maybe run a little bit astray. But as long as we go all the way down, go all the way to your final one, and then go right to the edge of the canvas, we can then go ahead and drag and drop the color into that space. What we then need to go ahead and do is go to our layers, and we need to go to the lines that we created and swipe them to the left and duplicate them. We're going to go to the bottom one out of the two, tap on it, alpha lock it, you'll see it change, and then tap on it and use the option of fill. Then tap on it and turn off the alpha lock. So now you've created the lines and also made them orange. And we're just going to go ahead and pinch these two together, so the orange lines and the orange background, onto one layer. What we're then going to go ahead and do is add some color to this. So we'll create a new layer, we'll tap on it, and we'll clipping mask it to the orange shape. We'll go to our colors, and we're going to grab the bottom color in that 6th column. We're then going to go ahead and go to our brush. We're going to change it to the soft brush under airbrushing. And the size probably wants to be a bit smaller than that, maybe around about sort of 6%. And now what you need to do is you need to take a look at your shapes and just introduce like a bit of a color towards the bottom in each individual shape. So here I'm just going to go ahead and try and just sort of create a lovely sort of blend of color here. The ones at the bottom are pretty easy to do, but you kind of don't want to just draw a line through them. So some occasions you may need to here, for example, drop it down to 3% and just push some color in here a little bit more randomly. If it runs astray, don't worry about it too much, it's fine. And then here, we can go ahead and just introduce some color in this shape here, like this. And then you kind of want to imagine that obviously like where they overlap, that there's maybe a little bit of shadow. Now, what you can do if you are sort of struggling to somewhat sort of stay within your shapes, you could make a selection of the shape itself. So for example, you could just grab your selection tool, use freehand and make sure color fill is gray, so it's not usable. And then you could just make a selection around sort of the next shape that you're going to fill in. So I'm going to go along this line here. I'm not going to do this every single time, but it's just as an example for you. Then tap on the dot. And now you've made just a selection in that space. You can go back to your brush and just fill that in without affecting any other area. You could make your brush size a little bit bigger as well. And you can darken it up at the bottom. And you can just create that lovely blend of color. Tap on your selection tool when you're done, and then just repeat if you need to for any other areas. Here, I'm going to go ahead and introduce a bit more color as well. And we're just going to leave like a little bit of orange, as you can see on the top edges. So let's go ahead and replicate that then in these areas here too. So I'm just going to blend up some color in some little crevices like here. I'm purposely going to try and maybe make them a little bit darker. Here, for example, again, where there's like a bit of an overlap between two areas here, possibly a third. Just introduce a bit of a darker area. And also it will just change them up from one another. So it'll keep them looking a little bit sort of randomized to one another. Blend that up. Introduce some in behind here. That'll look great. Push it towards the edges like so. And we'll do the same up here for the final two. There you go. You should have some lovely little sort of gradients like this. What we're then going to go ahead and do is go to our colors and grab this color here. It's the top of the 7th column. We're going to go to our layers and we're going to create another new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it into the stack. And then where you've got your shadows, you're just going to go in here and start to add in some further shadows. So we're going to bring our brush size down to maybe around about sort of 3% and just be very sort of light with it to start with, and then just pick and choose where you want to add some color. So you're essentially creating a gradient between the orange, the second color we used, and now this color down here. And you can create like little sort of random lines here and there if you like. So you can see there I just drew sort of two very, very light lines, and that will just add some sort of more texture to these areas. So I'm just going to sort of push a line occasionally outwards from here, just showing that there's like something else going on with the texture of the area. Again, you may need to make those selections that I showed you a second ago, just so you don't run into any other areas too much. But some little lines, maybe even reduce that brush size down to about sort of 2% maybe, and just get in here and darken up your corner and then push out some just fun sort of detail lines. That one's probably a little bit too strong. That's looking good to me. I like that. Let's then go ahead and just darken up in this one here, pushing out some lines here and there, and we'll do the same over here. So just keep making your way up and darkening up where your shadows were beforehand. Again, look for any sort of crevices where you think maybe the light doesn't quite reach them. And then I'm just going to create some little sort of arc shapes on this one. Kind of let that just roll outwards a little bit, have a bit of a curve to it, and then blend that in at the bottom. Creating some extra little details. This whole style is meant to be nice and somewhat loose and a bit easy. That's why we're just sort of rotating a few brushes. It's meant to be quite fun. And again, to use that word, nice and loose. So let's push out some lines out this way. Push out some lines here. Darkening up in here. And as you know in my tutorials, I don't skip over anything. We'll do it all together in real time. Sometimes there's helpful little tips here and there, but sometimes it's just me filling the dead space. So feel free to crack on with this in your own time and put me on pause potentially. It's totally up to you. Let me know in the comments if you do that. Do you pause or do you just follow along as I do it? So once we've done that, we've got some lovely extra shadows in here. Some of them a little bit darker to others, and we can come back and adjust them as well if needs be. We're then going to go ahead and go up to this white layer here, and that's our line work. We're going to go ahead and go to our colors again and grab that color, the top of the 6th column. We're then going to go back to our brush, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to scroll down in our brushes. Now this is somewhat sort of the only one where we add in a further texture. Now we're going to go into the option here of vintage, and we're going to use this one here, the Honey Eater brush. Now if I tap on the Honey Eater brush and I go ahead and we go into the option of grain, and I've changed the scale to 4%. I believe it should be 5 by default. You can leave it as 5, it's totally up to you, but I've just dropped the scale down to 4%. So under grain, change the scale to 4. And if we hit done, what this allows us to do with a brush size of 3%, if we go ahead and we go up towards our sort of white area here, we can go ahead and just add in this cool little dot effect as if it's like lots of texture, but it's keeping it nice and light. And just like we did with our shadows, we're going to create some sort of little curves here and there, little lines and trails where the texture sort of rolls round a little bit like this. Don't worry if it spills into the next one, that's fine. So we're going to go ahead and just create some texture running down from the top as if it's like the highlighted edges of this coral. A little something like that, keeping it nice and simple. And you can reduce the brush size if you want, maybe down to a smaller 3% here and there, just to sort of be in control of it a bit more. So totally up to you. You can see I'm just going to create these lovely little sort of curves here and there and kind of just blend in towards this white edge that we did. So now I'm going to curve them the other way. So it almost sort of flares out from the middle, and then just add in some texture along here, keeping it nice and sort of fun, nice and random. You can add in larger areas. I want you to keep it nice and random, like really simple, but just these additional little curves here and there, just sort of bowing the texture a little bit. And we'll do the same on all of them. So we'll just create some lovely little curves here, lovely curves, and then some nice dots up here. Little curves. You can let some run really low down if you like. It's totally up to you. And then I can maybe think at this point of just adding some here and then curving them the other way. So they kind of sort of flare out from that point instead. Some of them you might not be able to add too much sort of flaring to. So it's like all these little lines, I mean, and that's fine. You want to keep them all kind of a little bit sort of different to one another. Up here, we'll do the same. Add in some lovely dots along the top, so kind of just make sure I get a good amount of sort of coverage here and there, and then some little curves. Flare out the coral. I can flare these out in these spaces here. Link them at the top, so you're kind of prioritizing your highlights towards the top, of course, where that sun is maybe coming down through the water. A couple like so. Again, if you are able to keep your layers, you can always come back and adjust this if needs be later on. Totally up to you. Let's go ahead and do the same here. So I'm going to create like a curve where I can see like the bowing sort of works a little bit, sort of the curve of the coral. Adding in some fun dots. You can have some sort of go round on themselves like this, and then maybe they curve back round the other way again. So then maybe it starts to curve this way again. And again, I want to make sure the top edge has got like a nice sort of coverage of dots, and then you can do whatever you like with the flared lines. So add some dots, scribble along that top edge. You can see how quick and easy I'm trying to be with it, just trying to sort of blend it into my coral line at the top there. A couple of fun little curves. So what I'm looking for is like these sort of lines here. I imagine that where that bulges outwards, that it's leaning to the left, so therefore the curves sort of lean off to the left. So that's what we're kind of looking for. This one's a little bit sort of straighter, so some of these lines that we may be introducing here are going to have a little bit more of a sort of straighter line to it, so maybe we don't do quite so many. We just introduce the dots along the top a bit more. Now this is not the final colour for these lines up here. We're going to just add a blend mode to it in a second. This is just the easiest way and the most visible way of seeing this for the moment. So we're going to go ahead and just introduce some more. Introducing some more. Now don't worry if some of the lines run slightly out. And what I mean by that, like the dots and stuff, if they've run ever so slightly out, in a minute we're going to clip the layer, so they'll be nice and tidy in a moment, so you don't need to go back in a moment and address them. I'm going to make this one like really curved. It's really sort of flaring outwards, and then you should, once you're done, end up with something like this. Now again, if we go to our layer, as I mentioned, we're going to tap on it and we're going to change the blend mode from normal. We're going to change it to add. Right now it's going to be flared, like blown out completely, but we're going to go ahead and just bring that down, and we're going to bring it down until it starts to sort of blend in with the colors that we've previously got there. So around about sort of 40% looks pretty good to me. If we take a look at it, we've got this lovely sort of bold line effect, but at the same time we've got this lovely little bit of texture in there. So what we're then going to go ahead and do, we've got this extra layer in this group. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab this color here at the bottom here of the second column from the right. We're going to go back to our brush and we can go back into airbrushing or recent, it's totally up to you. Airbrushing and the soft brush. Brush size probably around about sort of 10%, and we're just going to sort of add in a little bit of blue down here just to sort of shadow this in a bit more. Shadowing it down here. We have got sort of further shadows to add later on in the design, but for a minute just sort of creating a bit of a curve here just to show the shadows a bit more, and you can just maybe blend that out a little bit more at the bottom. Great stuff. Right, let's move on to the next group. So that's group 2 done. Again, if you've got the layers, keep them. If you don't, tap on it and flatten it. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. Let's drag it underneath group number 2 and we'll create another layer. and we'll swipe from left to right and we will group them together. And of course, we'll tap on it, we'll rename it, and we'll call it group number 3. In group number 3, we're going to go to the bottom layer out of the 2. We're going to go to our colors. I'm going to grab this beautiful purple here at the bottom of the 5th column. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to go to the option of inking and dry ink. Again, you can use your recent section if you like. And we're going to focus on this area over here. And we quite literally just want to go ahead and just sort of follow this line down here. You can make it a little bit more sort of bumpy and lumpy if you like. Add some sort of extra sort of texture to it in a sense. We're going to let that run all the way down here. And we're going to drag and drop the color in. We're then going to go to our layers and we're going to go up to that empty layer above. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab this color here at the top of the 5th column. So everything's usually organized in columns. So I've got the top color here in the 5th column. And we're going to use the dry ink again, and we're going to create those sort of little, they almost look like tree branches. So for example, I'm going to start down here. I'm going to create like a twisty, curvy line that sort of runs up towards that edge there. And then I'll maybe sort of branch one off from here and maybe even another one from there. Follow along, but ultimately we're kind of creating almost like little branch lines and filling in the space with this awesome sort of different type of coral. So you can either start at the top and make your way down, you can start at the bottom and make your way up. It's totally up to you. Either way is incorrect, but you just want to sort of make sure you're sort of pressing with a good amount of pressure, and we'll eventually add some additional color in here. So it'll have some little bit of variation to it. You don't want to sort of necessarily go right up into the corner. So I wouldn't recommend, you know, sort of going right into here. Leave it a little bit more faint and a little bit more sort of on its own. Here, I'm going to let that make sure it runs all the way right to the edge. And that's kind of the goal with this. We want to make sure that these lines, they do just run quite close towards the edge of the purple section, because it's almost like just adding a layer of detail on top. And we want to sort of just make sure we cover up that sort of bold line. So once we've added in a few here, like so, we're going to make our way up here, and we can create some different shapes if we want, some that's a little bit more vertical, and then has like a couple of branches off from there. That's fine. Maybe it wraps around in some way. And occasionally you can maybe add in sort of just a little sort of one on its own. We'll do the same as we've been doing here. So a little curve over, couple in the gaps. You can think about it, take a look at it, maybe even link them together here. So like those two could link together. There's some fun, easy coral. That's all we want to do. Have some fun with it. That's always the key. Have fun with it. Let's then go all the way up to the very top up here. So I'm going to come in from the side as if there's sort of more going on outside the screen here. And we can just bring in some additional ones. And then I'll maybe bring in one here and then one that goes down there and one in the gap. So you can see there, I've not gone quite into the corner, and I've also just made sure that we do have like this sort of separation here. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to introduce another color. So we're going to go to the layer, we're going to tap on it, and we're going to alpha lock it. So we can't paint outside of the lines we've just drawn. If we go to our colors and we go to the middle color in that 5th column, brush wants to go to the option of airbrushing and the soft brush. Size, 10's probably pretty good. I'm just going to rotate my canvas because I want to create a bit of a curve here where we transition the somewhat sort of more peachy color into this beautiful red tone, and we can just go up the back here of some of these coral pieces. The top ones can stay a little bit sort of brighter, that's fine, but down here we just want to make sure that there's lovely sort of variation in the color, like so. Then what we want to go ahead and do is go to that layer. We're going to tap on it, we're going to add a mask to it. So a mask is really simple. If it's all white, everything on that layer is showing, but what you paint in black, you're then hiding. And likewise, you can then paint back in with white and reveal again. So your color will change to black, and you want to make sure you're on the mask. Then all we're going to do is just very lightly just sort of blend out, circular motion, blend out some of these lines here that run down into this sort of dark corner here. Just a tiny little sort of bit of blending out. That's all you need to do. We're going to add further shadows down here later on towards the end of the design. But there you go, you've got another set of coral. Look how fun those colours are. Let's then go ahead and move into this area here. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to collapse group 3 down. Same rules apply. Flatten it if you need to. We're going to create a new layer. We're going to drag it underneath group number 3. We're going to create another new layer. We're going to swipe from left to right on both of them, group them together, and of course rename this and call it group number 4. Again, this is just so that if we refer back to a group, you guys know what I'm talking about. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the bottom layer in group number 4. We're going to go to our colors, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab this middle color here in the third column from the right, this color here. Now we're just going to use the soft airbrush for a moment. I've got it down to about sort of 7%, and you can see this shape here. We're going to go ahead and just sort of very lightly, especially when you get up to this left edge line over here. So I want to sort of block in this color here. As you can see, I'm going to block it in right towards the bottom. That's fine. But once we get close towards that line, we just want to sort of be very sort of gentle with it. You don't want to make it too big and bold. As long as you get quite close to it, you're just going to end up with like a very subtle bit of purple there that transitions into some of the background color. So a little bit of color up here. As long as you've got that big block in the background, you're good to go. And we're going to get started creating the other little areas down here. Now for this, we're going to go to this empty layer here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go to our brush library. We're going to go to calligraphy on this occasion. We're going to use the monoline brush and we're going to max it out in size up to 100%. In this top area up here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to draw in a line like so. And pop your finger on the screen to make sure it's nice and straight. So you hold your pen at the end to get a straight line, then pop your finger on the screen to then equally make it a nice straight line. Once you've done that, we're then going to go to our cursor. We're going to go to the option of freeform, and we're going to make it a little bit wider, and we're going to zoom out a little bit. We're going to make it a little bit sort of narrower than that. Something around about this looks pretty good to me. Now I'm going to turn off my guide for a minute so it doesn't interfere. And this is the shape that you should have. It might look a little bit fuzzy on camera because it struggles with the colors sometimes like this. We're then going to go ahead and add in some color to this. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to tap on it. We will alpha lock it. We'll go to our colors. We're going to grab the bottom color in that third column from the right. We're going to bring our brush back to airbrushing. So airbrushing and the soft brush again. Slightly small brush size, probably around about sort of 4%. Going to darken up the right side here. And we're going to create one of these and then we're going to duplicate it and spread it all the way across. So create some sort of variation in your shadows. They don't need to be perfect. You can see I created a line there, there's a big sort of block here, there's another little dash of colour there too. We're then going to go ahead and add some additional highlights to this. So we'll grab this colour here, the bottom of the fourth column from the right. We can just slightly add this little edge on the left here. This is going to add like a bit of a slightly different, if not slightly red tone to this, and then curve that round the top. It's very, very subtle. We're then going to go to this colour there. This is the sort of main point here. We're going to grab this one, the middle colour in that fourth column from the right, and I'm probably just going to sort of brighten up this area here. Now that brush size is probably a little bit too big, so I'm going to drop that down to about sort of 2%. I want to keep it inside the shape a little bit and create like a bit of a brighter point on the top, but ultimately just create like a bit of a highlight that runs down here. I also want to go ahead and introduce like a little bit that runs off on the right, just a tiny bit. I'm just glossing up and down that edge there, just a tiny bit. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to our brush, we're going to go to inking and the dry ink, and we're really going to highlight this edge. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go up this edge here, we're going to go around it because it's got to fit within the rest of the theme of the design. So I'm just going to brighten up this top edge here. That looks pretty good to me. We can maybe sort of bring that down a tiny bit down the right hand side, just a tiny bit, mainly focusing it on that left side, and then maybe just like the odd sort of small detail up here with like an additional sort of scrape line or two, like something like this. Now the only addition I want to change here is if we go to our eraser and we tap on it and we go into, we could probably use the dry ink brush. I'm just going to sort of curve this off a tiny bit more. So I'm just going to just round that off a tiny bit more. You may want to use the monoline brush for this bit. Just want to get rid of those sort of sharper points on the end there. So now we've got this shape, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to duplicate this multiple times, and we're going to duplicate it around about sort of 9 or 10 times to create a collection, and then just use that collection multiple times to create the full scene. So we're going to go to the layer, we're going to swipe it to the left and duplicate it. We'll select both of these for a minute from left to right and group them together just so that they're nice and organized. And we're going to go ahead and the first one, the top one, we're going to tap on it, we'll turn off its alpha lock for a minute, we'll grab its cursor, we'll move it into a different spot such as here. We'll tap on our cursor and then we're going to go up to our adjustments. We're going to go ahead and go to the option of liquify. We're going to go ahead and use the option of push, and you can see all the settings down here. And we're just going to go ahead and just kind of push it to the left a little bit, push it to the right, make sure it's sort of dancing in the water. So create like a nice sort of wobble like this, and then we're going to repeat. So we'll go back to our original shape. We'll swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Tap on the layer, turn off the alpha lock. Grab your cursor, move it into position. So this one's going to sit in behind, that's fine. I'm going to move this one up towards the top. I'll grab my adjustments, liquefy, and we'll make a small little wobble in it. This one here sitting at the back is fine. You don't need to add in too much on this one. Just a little something, maybe sort of leaning off to the left, maybe like so. You can always come back and adjust them. Go to your base shape again, duplicate it, tap on it and turn off the alpha lock. Grab your cursor and just start to fill out your scene. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to position another one in behind there as well. I'll grab my adjustments, liquefy, and I'll maybe lean this one into that one. Because again, we want them all to be nice and random, but we also want to make sure it has like a big sort of collection, you know, they're kind of all connected somehow. If we go to our layers again, go to our base shape, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. On this occasion, I'm going to drag it towards the top of this group though. Tap on it and turn off the alpha lock. Grab the cursor, and then I'm going to position this one in front, so maybe a little bit lower down, giving them sort of different variations on their heights. Go to adjustments, liquefy, and then we'll make this one dance as well. So we'll really sort of just adjust it. You may need to go ahead and go back in and make it a little bit wider if you made it a little bit too narrow here and there. And occasionally you may need to just sort of separate them, just making sure you can see them individually to one another. But, you know, create some fun, very wobbly lines in here, like so. That looks pretty cool. Let's then go back to our layers. Let's duplicate our base shape, tap on it and turn off the alpha lock. And then we're going to grab our cursor and we'll move this one up here. We'll go ahead and tap on our cursor. We'll go to our adjustments. We'll go to liquefy. We'll make this one a little bit wobbly too. So maybe a little bit something like this. Again, sometimes they don't have to be really dramatic. They can be pretty straightforward, but you know, maybe this one will give it a nice sort of lean off to the right. That's fun. Then we'll go to our base shape, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. We'll tap on it. We'll turn off the alpha lock. Grab your cursor and move it. Now I'm going to go ahead and adjust this in its layer position. I'm going to put it here for a minute, but I'm going to grab my layer and I'm going to move it to the top of the group, grab my adjustments and liquefy. So now it sits in front. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and just make this one sort of dance in the movement of the water. Go back to our base shape, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Tap on it, turn off the alpha lock, move it to the top again, because we want to bring them forward. Grab your cursor. Let's put one here as well. Go to our adjustments, liquefy, and we'll make this one again, just sort of dance. Maybe I need to go ahead and make sure it goes the other way. So maybe I'll make sure this one sort of leans off to the opposite side a little bit. A little something like this. You can exaggerate little areas here and there. A little something like that. And we'll go ahead and we'll go back to our base shape. Swipe it to the left and duplicate it. We'll drag it to the top again. And we'll tap on it and we'll turn off the alpha lock. Grab our cursor. We'll go ahead and move this one. I'm going to move this one so there's like sort of two here, sort of grouped together. Go to my adjustments, go to liquefy, and we'll adjust it, of course. So we'll just sort of just give it a little bit of movement. Nothing too crazy, but just a little bit, just so they're all a little bit random to each other. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab my base shape, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. I'm going to turn off this extra one at the bottom for a minute because we're actually going to reuse that again. So we're going to tap on this now. We're going to turn off the alpha lock once again. And then this is the one that you can still see in this position. So if I go to my adjustments and go to liquefy, I'm just going to sort of move it around. So it's not fully straight, but it just sort of sits in that gap. And then you should end up with a little something like this, where we've got a lovely little sort of cluster of them. And we can duplicate these, as I mentioned, and just fill out the whole scene. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pinch all of the ones that are turned on, excluding the alpha locked one, together. So we'll pinch them all together so they're on one layer. And there you go, you've got your cluster. We're then going to go ahead and we're going to swipe it to the left and we're going to duplicate it. Again, it's kind of the same principle as what we were just doing. This is going to be our original. This is the one we can come back to. So we're going to grab the top one, grab your cursor. We're going to go ahead and use the uniform option. We're going to scale this down in size and we're going to chuck it in here. We're going to curve it. We're going to push it into this sort of space here. These ones are going to be a tiny bit smaller. And then we're going to add a second layer in front that will be a little bit bigger. So these ones can be a little bit smaller. And then we'll grab our layer. You can actually grab this one here that we just moved, swipe it to the left and duplicate it, and just keep moving it until we start to fill the scene. You may need to rotate it here and there. You may want to flip it horizontally here and there as well, just to sort of, if you can spot any sort of easy repetition, that's fine. Swipe it to the left and duplicate it, grab your cursor, flip it horizontally if you need to be, and just keep filling in this space. Overlap them a few times though, like this, because then that will avoid that very easy repetition that you can easily spot. Just keep making your way around. We're going to keep rotating as we go. We're going to put them like this. Keep going all the way around. So again, your layers may sort of suffer for a minute, your layer count, and I'll just sort of show you in a moment. If we flip that horizontally for a second, and we start to make sure these all curve inwards, and I'll position this one up here. If you're struggling, just keep sort of this big one here at the top and just pinch the ones you've done already together, if that's the easiest way for you. But I'm just going to keep duplicating my shape. I'm going to rotate it every time, maybe even scale it up and down. You know, maybe you want them as they get further up here to get a little bit smaller to one another. I'm just going to keep making my way all the way up here. So this one's a little bit of a repetitive stage, but we don't have to draw them all in. You know, this is quite an easy way to do it. And then occasionally scale some up, scale some up. We can go ahead and maybe even warp them slightly if you want to sort of adjust the shapes quite a bit. You can just use the warp tool. If you feel like they're getting a little bit too repetitive to one another, that's fine. Use the warp tool, really vary it up. But also, like I mentioned, just stacking them in different ways. If I grab this layer and maybe move it down just underneath pretty much all of them, it will just stack in a slightly different way, and you should avoid that repetition. We're then going to go and make sure we swipe it to the left and duplicate. I don't know which one this is. It's there, that's fine. And we'll just move this one up into here. Love that. And we'll grab our cursor yet again. Or maybe make this one sort of stick. Well, let's make this one actually just sort of position here. Maybe with a slight gap. It doesn't need to be sort of full the whole way around. So maybe I'll leave a little bit of a gap. And maybe that's what I'll also do is I'll find a layer such as this one here. And maybe I'll just sort of bring that one down a little bit. Just making sure it's not so much of a perfect sort of curve all the way around. Now I need to go ahead and find the ones that are on the right, which I believe are these ones here. So I'm just going in and duplicating. There's no sort of thing to really sort of keep an eye out for here. It's just a matter of just keep duplicating all your way around till you get up close to this top corner. Don't worry about that extra bit of purple up there. So now we've kind of filled in that area, and what we can then do is we can just go in there and find a few that we sort of want to try and find. And I'm going to grab, say, that one there that I just turned on and off, that one there. I'll grab my cursor and I'll just move that one down again just to sort of vary up that. And I might even start to rotate a few more just to make sure they kind of have different angles to each other. So let's try and find another one towards the middle, such as this one here. I'll grab my cursor and maybe rotate that one in a little bit here, just a tiny bit. That looks pretty good. Again, that varies up the layer effect. It looks like these ones here kind of sit in front of those. I like that, that's cool. Now, if you're happy with everything, you can go ahead and pinch all of those layers together. We can pinch all of them together. Now make sure you are not pinching together, as I just did there, your main one here at the top. So find that one here, your original base shape, and then pinch all the rest of them together. Then our base shape here that we created, we're going to swipe it to the left and duplicate it. We're going to move it in front of what we just was working on, that big curve. We're going to grab our cursor and we're going to create an extra layer. And these ones are going to sit in front. They'll be a little bit bigger. You can maybe even uniform them up in size if you like. But just a few more that are a little bit bigger here towards the front area. So once you've done that one, you can go back to your base shape, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Grab your layer and grab your cursor. Rotate it maybe a little bit. Stick some more sort of here. Just giving us some extra sort of layer to the design. Swiping it to the left again, duplicating it. I'll rotate this one, I'll maybe even flip it horizontal as well, just to sort of add some extra ones here. Now you don't need to fill out the entirety of the sort of space down here, as long as we are creating sort of those two layers. We've got that back layer and the front layer. And then I'm going to go to my base shape again, swipe it to the left once more, move it up and above that first curve, grab my cursor and just move this one into sort of this position here. I'm going to flip that horizontally, I think. And no, you know what, I liked it the other way around. Let's flip it that way again, rotate that into position. And I'm going to go ahead and let's pop this one a little bit higher and in that space there. So once you've gone ahead and made your second layer, again, you can go ahead and pinch all four of those layers onto one layer. So you can turn it on and off just to be sure. and you've got your base shapes. Now it's totally up to you. Again, if you've got the layer count, you can keep your base shape here. You can keep that singular line. It's totally up to you. It's just something as sort of a preference if you want to come back to it. So what we're going to go ahead and do, we've got our back arc here. We're going to create a new layer. We're going to tap on it and we're going to clipping mask it to that. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to go ahead and we'll grab the middle color in that second column from the right. Go to your brush and go to the option of airbrushing and the soft brush. And we're going to make sure our brush is set to around about the 10% mark. And we're going to introduce some shadows towards the bottom here. So just very lightly, keep it really, really light just towards the bottom. And this will also now help separate your back curve here, or your sort of area here, from the front. So I'm just introducing a bit of a shadow here, and then maybe a little bit darker down in there. That looks fine. Varies up the shadows a little bit. And maybe even we sort of darken up the left-hand side, especially later on, this will come into effect. So it's going to darken up that left-hand side a little bit more. Little bit of a sort of separation between these two layers. Will look cool. And then we'll also darken up a tiny bit more up here on the right side. We're then going to repeat that for the front area. So we'll go to the front area, we'll create a new layer, we'll tap on it and we'll clipping mask it to the front area. We'll make it around about sort of 12%, and in here again we will just darken up here. Just again, we're kind of creating lots of layers. We've got this sort of front area followed by then the ones that we've just been working on. It's just trying to create some areas of separation. We're then going to go ahead and go to our layers and create another new layer though, and tap on it and clipping mask it, and we'll change the blend mode of this layer from normal. We'll change it to the option of overlay. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab this color here, the bottom of the third column from the right, and then we're just going to sporadically, just sort of very, very lightly add in some color. Now if I press really firm, for example, this is what's going to happen. You're going to change the color of that space. So I'm quite literally going to drop my brush size down to about 7% and be very, very sparing, but also very random. I want to create some little areas of different color that just separate it again from the area in behind. So these ones here getting a little bit more light and therefore a little bit more color. We can then go to our colors as well and grab the top color in the third column from the right and do exactly the same. Maybe some areas of blue, but towards the bottom maybe where it's a little bit cooler. So you can just add in a little bit of blue here and keep it nice and light. If you press a little bit too firm, you'll get a lot of color. That is fine, but just maybe go in there and lower the opacity of the layer. I think that looks pretty cool though, with just like that extra little sort of variation change. And then in this group, once more, we're going to create another new layer, but we're going to go ahead and not clip it. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab that bottom color in the second column from the right. Soft airbrush yet again. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to darken up over here. Now the brush size is set to about sort of 15%. We're going to shadow in over here, creating some separation and also just extra lighting ready for later on. I'm going to go ahead and darken up here quite a bit, just sort of letting that get really darkened so that they're really, really faint up here and we can't really see them. The lighting is going to beam through and it's going to sort of hit this area here more so. So we kind of want to sort of darken up the left side and the right side, getting ready to focus our attention in towards those brighter areas. So now that we've done all of these details, you can see that little soft area of purple. We're going to go back into our layers. We're going to grab that background area here and just grab your brush, make sure it's set to your eraser and go to airbrushing and the soft brush. And we're just going to make sure it's about 9% and just sort of fade that out. You can leave a little bit of it in the gaps, but we don't want it to sort of run too high and on its own. So such as up here, we can get rid of the purple. If it's just in sort of these little gaps, I don't mind that because it's sort of extra sort of color in that area, but just as long as it doesn't run too high on its own. Then we're going to go to our layers. We're going to collapse group 4 down. We're going to go ahead and create another new layer and drag it underneath group 4. And then we'll create another new layer, swipe from left to right on both, group them together, and we'll rename the group, of course, and we'll call it group number 5. We're going to go to the empty layer in group number 5. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this middle color here in the second column from the right. Our brush wants to be set to the option of soft brush under airbrushing and around about sort of a 15-13%, something like that. We're going to work in this area here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and create this lovely big dark shadow up here. Make sure it's nice and wobbly, as you can see there. I'm sort of bouncing my pen up and down here and there. And you can see I'm not going up to the line because that's where we're going to add in our sort of next area of sort of the seabed. So we're going to go ahead and just add in this big dark shadow under here, kind of creating little patches here and there, kind of making sure this is nice and wobbly, almost like a very sort of rocky texture that we can't really see too much. And then over here, I'm just going to bring that a little bit higher and a little bit inwards. We're then going to go back to our brush and we're going to go to the option of inking and the dry ink. If we go to our layers, we can go up to the empty layer then in group number 5, the layer above, and we get started by creating these like somewhat kind of tree shapes. And we want to emerge almost from the sort of shadows that we've created. You want to create sort of your little kind of main trunk here. So maybe I can thicken this up. You see, I've not started right up in the corner yet because we're actually going to duplicate this and save some time. So we're going to create these lovely sort of squiggly lines, and they're just going to continue to branch out, branch out, branch out, branch out. So one here, one here, one here. Just keep going, just keep branching them out. Let them overlap one another. I always think that looks particularly cool. It just looks like there's so much depth to it. It's kind of quite a 3D object. You know, things are in front of us, some things are behind one another. And so perspective wise, they sit in front of one another. Let's create some more. And they look awesome when they just continue just to sort of split off from one another. Lovely stuff. Let's then also, as we go down our trunk, maybe just introduce sort of these little spikes that come off here and there. And then what you want to then do is once you've sort of got to a point where you're getting close to sort of filling it in, just go back in here and add in lots of small individual lines that just sort of branch off. And then that way you'll really fill out the sort of shape a bit more. So creating some little extra sort of spikes. Now down here, you'll start to sort of lose it a little bit. You might not be able to see it too well, but just try your best just to fill that in. I'm going to fill in the trunk a bit more there, and then just add in lots of small sort of dashes, that little spikes almost, small ones in the gaps. They look really, really cool. Let's keep going all the way along these lines. Make sure we add in lots of fun, little small, easy details. Up here, up here, and a couple in here too. There we go, and I'm pretty happy with the shape of that one. That one looks nice and full. Now at this stage, it's totally up to you. You can go ahead and draw multiple, or you can go to the layer, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. We can go ahead and we can grab our cursor, we can flip it horizontally, we can rotate it just so it's a little bit different, and we can go ahead and position one up here, for example. You may even want to distort it maybe and make it like a little bit taller, maybe even warp it slightly and make it a little bit sort of bit of a different shape somehow. You know, like this one now, I've introduced this curve to it and it immediately looks different to that one, and I'm pretty happy with that one. That looks cool to me. I grab the uniform option and maybe scale it up in size, and we want to position one just up in this top left corner. We can go back to our original one here. We can swipe it to the left and duplicate it. We can grab either one of them and grab your cursor, and we can then move it off to the other side. So we'll grab that, we'll move it over here. And you can do small things where you can just maybe position one just down here where it's really underneath that shadow. It's kind of blending into the darkness below. And then duplicate it again, grab your cursor, maybe put another one a little bit higher up this time. Again, flip it horizontally, flip it in any direction you like, as long as you're happy sort of with the amount of repetition that you may or may not be able to see. And then I'm going to just continue that on by duplicating that layer again and just moving it up into sort of the edge there. And maybe I'll scale this one down in size and try and position one just sort of sticking out a little bit here. And we'll do the same once again. Grab the cursor, duplicate it, rotate it a little bit, maybe even warp it slightly. You know, nothing too sort of overly drastic, but just enough that you can change the shape. And then position this one sort of sticking out at the top. Oh, I love that. That looks like we've got some real layer depth to it. Now you'll notice I've also not really positioned any here by sort of where our fish will go. We don't need to necessarily sort of fill in behind there. This left side's looking a little bit sort of empty, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to grab the main one here, duplicate it again, grab my cursor, just scale it down in size, rotate it a little bit, and maybe again just have it so it's just emerging from the shadows down here a little bit more. It was something like that, just to fill out that space. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to keep a original one just in case we need it. Let's swipe it to the left and duplicate it and turn it off, the bottom one. And then we can pinch all of our sort of trees together. Then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to swipe it to the left and we're going to duplicate it. We're going to grab our cursor. We're going to go ahead and flip it horizontally, not vertically. We're going to rotate it round a little bit like so, just like this. Now, at the minute, it's probably looking a little bit messy, but what we're going to do is we're going to go to our layer. We're going to drag it underneath the dark shadow, and we're going to go ahead and we need to make sure it's in the group. So you may need to drop it here and then grab your shadow and move it in front. And we're going to grab the layer. We're going to reduce the opacity down to around about sort of 26%. So it's super, super faint there in the distance. And you're just adding in like another layer of the sort of coral area. So I've kept that nice and sort of faded out there at the background. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to our main area here at the top with our trees and also our shadow. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move the shadow above, and we're going to pinch the two together, the trees and that shadow, into one. We're going to create a new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it. Now we're going to go ahead and go to our colors. We'll grab this color here at the top of that second column from the right, and our brush wants to be changed to the option of textures and grunge. And we're going to keep this really random. I just want you to go ahead and sort of, the brush size by the way is set to 24%. Just in here, on these sort of edges of these branches, just add in the tiniest sort of little random little patches here and there of brighter tone. So yes, you're somewhat sort of remembering that the lighting's coming from above, and so maybe catches on a few, but I want you to keep it nice and random in here. And then go to our brush and change it to, or color should I say, and the bottom of that second column from the right. This is a slightly darker tone, and then somewhat where you think the shadows will be, maybe down here, maybe down here and behind our fish. Again, we don't need to sort of specify that too much, but just little areas of sort of random shadow. We need to just dash them in, dash them into the top though as well. Like they don't just necessarily have to all be highlights up here. You can dash in some little areas of random shadow. And at the minute, it may be like, Joel, this is looking a bit messy. What's going on? We're going to go ahead and we're going to blur them out. It's just adding in some additional sort of variations in the colors. And we'll do exactly that. We'll go to our adjustments. We'll go to Gauge and Blur. We'll swipe from left to right. And we'll blur it out to around a good level. We don't want it to be too sort of detailed. So probably around about sort of 10 to 15%. I'm going to go to the upper of that, around about sort of 15. And then tap on my adjustments when I'm done. And now that sort of area there just has some variation in its color. Some are slightly lighter, some are slightly darker. Next, let's move into the background area. So that's group 5 done with. We can go ahead and create another new layer, drag it underneath group 5. We can create another new layer, and we can swipe from left to right on both, group them together, and of course rename this and call it number 6. Now in this group, we're going to go to the bottom layer out there too, go to your colors, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab this nicer sort of brighter tone here at the bottom right of the palette. Brush wants to go back to airbrushing and the soft brush, and the size, we can make it sort of fairly large, maybe around about sort of 19 to 20%, if not slightly larger than that. And then we can go round in a circle, very, very light with your pressure, and just create that lovely gradient between what is the background color and a slightly brighter tone up here in the top left. So we're just blending that down, creating that lovely sort of transition of the color. And if you turn off your layer, first of all, you can see the difference. We're just bringing in that highlight at the top. Then on the layer above, we're going to go ahead and go to our colors. Grab the top right color in the palette. Same brush again. We're going to keep this very small though, probably even smaller than that, maybe around about sort of 4 to 5%. And we're going to create some diagonal lines. We're just going to sort of streak in some lines through the water here. So I'm just going to create some here with a 4%. And you want to keep it really, really light to start with. And you can flare them out a little bit. So what I mean is they're kind of going in this direction, but also going in this direction, and then also a little bit in this direction. So you can see they kind of flare outwards. But let's undo them. Let's reduce the brush size down to maybe 3%. We're going to sort of vary up our sizes just so we've got some good sort of fun variations in the lines, the light beams. I'm a big fan of these at the minute. I'll drop it down to 2% and we'll create some thinner ones. Now you don't need to make these go all the way to the bottom. We're going to go ahead and just use these as background colors for a minute. So a little something like this, and you can see you're now starting to sort of prioritize where that lighting's coming in. I'm going to make sure some come down because it's going to hit this here. So later on we do need to adjust these shadows probably a little bit further because the light's going to sit and be on this area here. So we've got some lovely background color. If your lines are a little bit sort of more diagonal like mine, I'm just going to go ahead and just rotate them. Just rotate them so they're pointing downwards a little bit more. Tap on my adjustments when I'm done, and maybe I just need to continue those lines a little bit more. Now they're kind of facing the direction I need them. Right, let's get started with our main cheese, our clownfish. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go right to the top. We're going to create two new layers. We're going to group them together, but we're going to rename this one and we'll just call it clownfish so that it's nice and easy as to where it is. Now, at this point, you may start to run out of layers. Again, we've sort of spoken about you can flatten any one of these down later on. You'll just have to make some slight adjustments with your highlights and shadows later on if we make any adjustments. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off everything. So we're going to turn off all the other groups. We don't need them on for the minute because we just want to focus on our clownfish itself. So we're going to go ahead and you'll notice that the clownfish is facing to the right. That's just when I did the stencil. We're going to flip it until it faces the left in a moment. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with our base shape or base color, which is going to be this color here, the bottom of the third column there. Our brush, we're going to go ahead and change our brush to the option of inking and dry ink. Now, please feel free to use something like the monoline brush if you don't want that sort of jagged edge. It's totally up to you. And all we're going to do is just outline the shape that I've already drawn here for you. So we're going to go ahead and just follow the shape round. Now, I've using the dry ink because I want everything to have that uniformed style. So I'm going to go in here, and if your lines don't match up perfectly, just like mine there, I've made a slight variation, a little bit of a tweak on the fly. That's fine. So for example, I'm going to come along here and then I'm going to sort of bring that sort of back fin in a little bit more of a sort of swooping line. Everybody's fish can look different, and that's fine. We're going to go along this line here and we're going to make our way up the back. It's going to have some lovely sort of wobbles in it. You may need to smooth out some lines though, such as here, and then scoop that round. We've then got this top area up here, so I'm going to go ahead and just follow the line all the way around. And again, I may make some minor adjustments on the fly where I just sort of let that swoop in a little bit more up onto the back, then swoop that round up onto the other one. So here we're going to go ahead and I'm going to bring this line down here a little bit more, and then we're going to go up here, link that into there. There's a little bit more of a swoop on it. And again, yours can look different, that's fine. Maybe have a look at some reference images of a clownfish if you need to. And then once you've created that big, beautiful loop, we can drag and drop the color in. It's going to be quite bright on your screen. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new, well, we're going to use the empty layer. We'll tap on it and we will clipping mask it for a start. We're just going to add in the white areas. So we're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab this color here, the top of the sixth column there. And we're going to add in, again, the white areas. Now these, again, you can make yours slightly different. They do not need to be exactly the same as mine. Roughly sort of the right position will do, but if yours looks slightly different to mine, that's not a problem. So we're going to create like a bit of a C shape here. We're going to go round on ourselves and then go back out. That's fine. And again, I want everybody's to look a tiny bit different. I want everybody to have a slightly different clownfish. That'd be cool. Then in this gap here, we're going to go ahead and run in another line. Now, of course, we've got this fin to do at some point, but for the minute, we're just going to go ahead and just sort of draw in a bit of a sort of straight line down into sort of here. And then they kind of sort of flare out a little bit, sort of round out a little bit over here. And then again, block that in. Any sort of excess, just get in there and just sort of grab your eraser and maybe just erase. You just run astray slightly like I just did. And up here, I'll just tidy that up. I'll tidy that up as well. Go back to our brush. We've now got another shape to do, which is just going to be here on the back tail. I'm just going to bring that into here and we'll just create another one in here like so. That looks pretty good to me. I may even sort of thicken that one out a little bit more. And I'll also do the same over here. I want mine to have maybe a little bit sort of wider of a little bit of a D shape almost in there. And then we're going to go ahead and get started with the dark lines. So we'll create another new layer. We'll tap on it and we'll clipping mask it. We'll go to our colors. And we're going to grab this color here in the top left of the palette. And we're going to go ahead and outline these areas here with some little bit of black flare. So this one here, you can kind of wobble your pen, keep it nice and light, vary up your pressure as well. So you can just let the lines get a little bit thinner here and there. And we can bring sort of a little bit of sort of black down here, and then a little bit round onto here. And then on the front as well, we can introduce like a sort of larger black area here, and then just let them just get a little bit thinner, a little bit of black here and there. And then in this middle area as well, we're going to go ahead and go down the back. We'll vary up our pressure up and down. Use that dry ink brush, use the texture in it and also the pressure sensitivity, and just let that sort of wobble its way down. And we'll do the same around the front of it as well. So I'm gonna make sure my brush is pointing downwards a little bit, so it's quite a solid shape. Wobble that all the way, making then it get a little bit thinner towards the bottom. Just make sure there's no gaps. And we'll move across to the back end where we can add just a little bit of a band on it, basically. So we kind of follow the white lines, and again, sort of vary up your pressures here and there, just so you can create some thin areas, maybe like here, and then some slightly larger black areas like so. There's also additional black areas we need to introduce. We're going to go ahead and we're going to look at this bottom fin here, and we're going to introduce a sort of quite a large area. So it's going to start somewhat thin, and you can sort of just outline it. So you can start off over here, and then from there we're going to go ahead and just sort of block in the back area here a little bit more, and then we want to kind of just make sure it's a little bit sort of wobbly, a little bit sort of janky. So I'm just wobbling my pen up and down just to create some randomness in sort of the dashing of the color around there. We'll do exactly the same then on this back area here as well. We're going to follow this line, follow it all the way around onto the back area here. And then again, we'll just sort of wobble our pen, allowing sort of the randomness of this particular clownfish's sort of pattern to be exposed. So there's little sort of wobbles here and there. That's going to look great. If we then move across back to the tail, the sort of whole of the back area here is going to be nice and wobbly. So we're just going to wobble our pen along here and then just create a little bit of a thin outline here. And you can, again, make sure it's nice and wobbly. So just add in little sort of bumps and lumps in there. That's going to look fantastic. We'll go up towards the top area here. Do exactly the same. So we kind of just, I'm going to wobble our pen along here. And we want to make sure it's nice and bouncy. Not sort of scrapey. You want to make sure that they are quite bold kind of shapes along the top there. You should end up something with like this so far. We've then got one more to do, and you can see I'm just rotating my just canvas a little bit here just to make it a little bit easier on me. And then I'm going to go ahead and just wobble my pen up and down the back area here. And then these ones here, I'm just going to make sure they're occasionally a little bit sort of liney, a little bit sort of a little bit more sort of straight lines, a little bit sharper edges to them, less like that wobbly look to them. So they've got a little bit more line mark, and that's sort of the sort of spines, I guess, within there. Now at this point we will draw in our fin as well, so we'll go to our layers. We're going to go ahead and create another new layer, and we're going to go to our colors and grab the bottom color again in the third column. Now just for a minute, just go to your base shape of your fish and just bring that down a little bit, just so we can see these oranges against each other, otherwise you won't be able to see what you're drawing. So I've just dropped it down to 48% for a moment, and we're going to draw in the fin. So I'm going to make it slightly longer than the stencil provided. So I'm just going to go ahead and wobble my pen along here, and then again make it a little bit longer because we're going to need to sort of blend this out. So I'm going to make a loop, drag and drop the color in, block in any sort of too many gaps if there is any. Then I'm going to grab my eraser, tap on the eraser, make sure I'm using the soft airbrush, and with about a sort of 2% brush size, I'm just going to blend out this edge here. Just a very, very, very thin sort of blending. I want that just to run into the body like so, and I can just push maybe the sort of center out a little bit. While we're working on here, we'll also go ahead and create another new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it to the fin. We'll go to our colors and we will grab that top left color again. Brush wants to go back to the dry ink if it's not already. And we're going to go ahead and add some color onto here too. We're going to start roughly over here, and we're going to go ahead and just wobble our pen then along here, and then just let that fall off. So you can get back in here again, make some little sort of wobbly lines. You can then create the odd little sort of point that runs a little bit longer. So what I mean is like these ones here, you can just make them run a little bit longer if you want to. Again, vary up your clownfish how you want it to look. Little something like that will do the trick. And then what we can do is we can go back to our layer and we can go back to our main fish and just bring that opacity back up to 100%. And now you can see your colors against one another. Now at this point, I just need to make a correction to the color. So I'm going to go ahead and on our base shape, we're just going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this middle tone here in the third column and we're going to drag it onto the main fish. And then we'll go to the fin as well and we'll drag and drop the color into there. In fact, we may need to go ahead and on this layer, just tap on it and alpha lock it on the fin and tap on it and fill it just to make sure it's fully full and then turn off the alpha lock. Now on the actual fish itself, we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. And we're going to get started with adding in our colors. Now we're going to go ahead and grab that bottom color there in the third column. Our brush wants to be set to the soft airbrush and we're going to add in some highlights. So we're going to make sure our brush size is probably around about sort of 4%. And we're going to go ahead and one thing we need to sort of make sure we consider is that there are body lines almost. So like let's just, for example, just draw that in and draw in here. So you may want to do this on actually leave it in for a moment on a temporary separate layer, but they're your body lines. You know, this is where your fins are, of course, here and here, and then your body sort of curves in this nature, in sort of that sort of, you know, curving belly and curving top. So just bear that in mind with what we're about to do. So if I tap on that layer and I clear that, let's get started with adding in some of the first colors. So around about sort of a 3 to 2% brush size, I'm going to go ahead and just sort of create the curve of the sort of fin here. So I'm following that body line that I can sort of in my mind still see that curves here. And then I'm blending that up towards the edge, really light with my pressure and just creating a nice blend between what was the original sort of quite dark tone into this lovely, nice bright orange tone. We'll do the same on this one as well. We'll just create a bit of a curve here, make sure we kind of abide by that body line and then just kind of circular motion, just blend outwards towards the top like so. Then we'll go ahead and we'll repeat that somewhat for the bottom, except this time we start at the bottom, we blend our way upwards, we leave a little bit of a sort of shadow here underneath and blending that out. Make sure it's nice and bold with the color. Let's go to around about sort of a 4% brush size. The brush size isn't critical. And again, we'll just sort of blend this up and then leave in a little bit of a darker tone here where the sort of underside of the belly will be. Let's then go ahead and add in some color to the actual body itself. So about 3% brush size, I'm just going to sort of bring this light stroke first of all, keep it really, really gentle and just let that run all the way around. So just going to undo that last one because I sort of jittered on the screen. So we're going to go around here, creating a lovely curve. And then you may want to reduce your brush size to something a bit smaller, around about sort of 2% and get that body line almost in. So a little bit of a sort of quite a defined line almost underneath there. So that separates the body from the fin there. And we're going to go ahead and make our brush size about 3% again and just blend round. So just creating this lovely brighter tone on top of what is our base color. So I'm just curving now. And in the middle, you're kind of drawing a straight line. So again, you're creating curves that kind of go like this. Okay, so it's like a watermelon. That's kind of what you're looking for. So we're going to go ahead and just blend that round here. And we're going to go ahead and do it at the top as well. So we'll just go ahead and just bring in a highlight along here. We're going to get pretty close to that, what I keep calling a body line. You know, up here where the body and the sort of fin sort of break apart from one another and become their own things. So I've dropped the brush size down to 2% so I can get pretty sort of solid with the line almost, but also give it a little bit of a fade out. We don't want it to be too much of a sort of solid line. So I'm just getting back up here now with the 2% and just fading that out a little bit more. I'm then also going to go ahead and just continue with the 2% now. And if you end up creating some lines here where they're not quite sort of blended, so I've gone sort of 2% then 4%, that's fine. It'll add some more sort of curve to the actual sort of fish body. I'm going to come down here, I'm going to brighten up the top of the head. And I'm also going to go ahead and really sort of brighten up the underside under here as well. So a little bit of extra color there. On the back fin, we'll also go ahead, or on the tail, should I say, we're going to go around in a circle, sort of really brightening it up here and blending that out until we get this lovely sort of just fiery almost color. That looks awesome. And then again, I'm just going to go ahead and just blend that a little bit more in there. Get rid of that body line a bit more. And I'm going to go up to 5% and just try to fill in the body a little bit more here so that there is like the odd sort of dark patch here and there in the body where it's just like a sort of minor variation of it. So you should end up with a little bit of color like this. And I just want to go ahead one more time and just sort of try and blend out those edges just a tiny bit, almost like the corners of the lines a little bit more. So now we've done that, we can go ahead and move into the next color, which we're going to go up to our layers for. We're going to create another new layer. We're going to change the blend mode though from normal. We're going to change it to add, and we're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab this yellow. Now we do need to be quite gentle with this. At bottom of the second column, and we're going to add in sort of the main highlighted areas. Again, I'm trying to be really gentle with it. So I'm going to start in here, for example, and then blend up into there. And that was super, super gentle. So just sort of lower your opacity if you struggle a little bit of color in there, just a tiny bit, but we're going to focus a little bit more so on the body. Back here on the tail, we're going to go ahead and circular motion, just sort of blend that out, and it becomes really bright and punchy. And we can lower the opacity down of the layer afterwards if needs be. And then we're going to go in with a 4% brush size now and really brighten up that top edge of the fish. So brightening this up and then coming across like so. And then the odd again sort of variation in the body, like if you end up running a line somewhat through the center here of that watermelon that I mentioned earlier, you know, kind of the curvature of the body, that's fine. And then at the bottom, we'll just go around the sort of bottom edge of the fins here, introducing a lovely brighter yellow tone. And you should end up with something like this. Now, as I mentioned, you may need to go ahead and go to the layer and just drop the opacity down if you've pressed a little bit too firm. I'm pretty happy with my colors, so I'm just going to keep mine around about sort of 98%, just take it down a notch or two. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create another new layer. We're going to change the blend mode again from normal to add, but we're going to drop the opacity down to 40%. We're then going to change our brush back to inking and the dry ink, and we're going to create some just little sort of thin lines here in all of them. So just following sort of these line angles here, so just match up to mine as best you can, keeping these lines nice and thin, nice and light as well with the pressure. Lighter will be better. When you zoom out, you should end up with this lovely little sort of extra little bit of detail. So we're just going to go ahead and just run some of these lines in towards that body. Just a few, you don't have to do too many. A little something like this. Great stuff. Let's then move on to the tail as well. Now the tail is going to kind of thin outwards a little bit. You're going to kind of do like these kind of lines almost. So they curve out a bit more on the edges and then they're a little bit straighter towards the middle. So we'll go ahead and just create some more little sort of streak lines in here. Oh, that undid there. Let's then carry on. They don't have to be super long. You can make them sort of nice and small. You can introduce a few right towards the edges if you like. Trying to keep my pen a little bit sort of straighter and head on so it doesn't have that thicker approach to it. I want them to be thin. A little something like this. Some nice extra little ones towards the end will look cool. We'll do the same at the top, following the sort of the line works that we kind of did beforehand. So if your angles were sort of similar to mine, you should end up with all your lines in the right sort of position, facing in the right direction. At the top here, we'll do some more. Introducing some here. Occasionally I've got a little thick one there, and that's fine. I don't mind that too much at the sort of the top end. And then occasionally I'll just drop in a little thin one as well. Lovely stuff. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to just brighten up this top edge as well. We need to make sure it fits the rest of the aesthetic of the design, which is these bold lines. So I'm going to go ahead and just sort of brighten up there, and I'm going to brighten up under here as well, just a tiny bit more. We also need to replicate this work in the fin as well. So we're going to go ahead and go to the fin. We'll go ahead and we'll tap on it to start with, and we'll alpha lock it. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab the brighter tone here towards the bottom of the third column. We'll go to our color or brush. We'll go back to airbrushing and the soft brush, and we'll blend out from the left towards the right. So we're just going to blend this across, blending it across like so. Then we'll go to our colors, and I'm just going to switch it straight to this color here, the middle color in that third column, and just brighten up the left side a bit more. And just for layer's sake, I'm also going to grab the yellow the bottom of that second column, and then brighten up the furthest left edge as well with a little bit of a brighter tone over here. And then go to that layer, create another new layer, and change the blend mode again from normal to add. Drop it down to 40% again. Change your brush to the option of inking and dry ink, and we're going to add those fin lines again. So we're going to go ahead and just draw them in, just like the tail. You know, they want them to kind of sort of fan outwards a little bit towards the bottom, so you're kind of creating these sort of curved lines a little bit more, like this. A couple more so towards the end, maybe, as they run a little bit sort of closer in towards the body. That thick one's fine, I don't mind that. That one's also fine, just adds in some fun variation. And then when we zoom out, we've then done the fin as well. Now, if we also go to our layers and we go to the white stripes, we're going to go ahead and tap on them, and we're going to alpha lock them, so we can't paint outside of them. We're going to go to our colors, and we're going to go ahead and grab this color here, top of the third column. Your brush wants to be set to airbrushing and the soft brush, and we're going to make that brush size around about sort of 7%, and we're going to very lightly just sort of blend out the bottom of the lines a little bit, so blending them out, creating kind of that shaded side almost as well at the same time. So a little bit of a sort of variation, color change towards the bottom. We next need to go ahead and work on the face for our fish. So we're going to go ahead and create another new layer at the top in the clownfish group. We're going to go to our colors, and we're going to go ahead and I'm going to grab this color here, the bottom of the third column there. Your brush wants to be set to the option of inking and dry ink. And we're going to go ahead and draw in the largest circle that you can see here. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw in a large circle here. Try and hold your pen down, pop your finger on the screen until you get a nice perfect circle, and then just fill that in. And maybe you just have to round that off a little bit, but just fill in this area here. Then what we'll do is we'll go to our layers, we'll create another new layer. We'll go to our colors, and we'll grab the color in the top left of the palette. I'm going to go ahead and reduce the brush size down to 3%, but merely just so I can press quite firm here and draw in a circle, and then pop my finger on the screen to make sure it's a nice perfect circle. Scale that up a little bit, and then grab my cursor and move that down just into the center of that other circle that we drew, or something like this. Then grab your color. Once you've tapped on your cursor, drag and drop it in, and that's going to be our main eye. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to this layer here for our big circle. We're going to tap on it, and we're going to alpha lock it, so we can't paint outside of it. We're going to go to our colors, and we're going to start off with the darker tones first of all. So this color here, the middle color in the third column. Our brush wants to be set to airbrushing and the soft brush. And then underneath the eye, we've got about a 1% brush size with that soft airbrush. I'm going to go ahead and darken up under here. And we're going to just darken up in here, because the eye kind of like bulges outwards a little bit. Then I'm also going to go ahead and darken up the underside as well, just like so. Go around the bottom like this, make sure that underneath the eye is pretty dark. Then I'm going to go to my colors. I'm going to grab the orange color, middle color in that second column. We're going to go around that top edge. We're going to kind of somewhat blending it back into the fish almost a little bit more now. I'm going to go around these edges. I'm going to go ahead and then right under here, just introduce a little bit of this orange just to sort of highlight that bottom edge. And then I'm going to go to my color and grab the yellow. Very sparingly with this though, the yellow at the bottom of the second column, just right on that top edge. Just introduce a bit of a brighter edge to it. A little something like this. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the body of our fish, and we'll go ahead and we'll create another new layer underneath your white stripe. So create a new layer just here. Go to your colors and grab the middle color in that third column. And then underneath the eye, probably around about a 2% brush size, we're just going to go ahead and just create a bit of a shadow just under here. So following the curvature, but just sort of blending that out, keeping it nice and faint as you get further away. And you should end up with this like sort of bulging sort of circle design. Then we're going to go ahead and go up to the black layer for the pupil, and just go to your colors, and we'll grab the top color in the sixth column with a small brush size, probably around about 1%. Just up here, we're going to go in a circular motion very, very slowly and very lightly until you build up this little bit of a highlight up here, like so. Then we're going to go ahead and move on to the lips. Now, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll go to, let's go ahead and go, let's go above our pupil. So let's create a new layer. Let's go to our colors. I'm going to go ahead and start off with this color here, the darkest tone first of all. So the middle color in that third column. Your brush wants to be set to the option of calligraphy and the monoline brush. And we're going to outline the lips. Now, the size wise, we're going to want to set it to around about sort of the 23% mark. And for it, we're going to go ahead and follow this line here. It kind of droops down a little bit here, and then we need to just go back along the lip like so. So you end up with this shape. So if I zoom out, you can see it for scale. And then we're going to kind of replicate some of the things we just did up there. We're going to go ahead and tap on this layer. We'll alpha lock it. We'll go ahead and we'll go to our colors and we'll get started with the, let's go to the base color, this sort of middle bottom color in the third column. Brush wants to be set back to airbrushing and the soft brush, and the size, let's go about a 1 or 2%. And we're going to separate the sort of the two lips, so the bottom and the top. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a bit of a curve here, just separating that bottom lip and blending down in towards that shadow. And then I'm also going to go ahead and with a slightly larger 2% brush size, just sort of brighten up the top edge. And let that run down into here. And likewise, go back down to 1% and then bring that down into the corner of the mouth a bit more. And you can just about sort of round them off and link them together. And I just need to make these a little bit sort of bigger because we've got more colors to add in. So that shadow can sit on the bottom edge. If we then go to our colors and we go to the orange, the middle color in that second column, we'll brighten up the top edge a little bit, something like this, and then a little bit of color on that bottom lip as well. And we'll also go to the yellow, but we'll keep it very sparing. So the bottom of that second column, and we'll just brighten up the top edge there. And maybe if I drop that right down to a very small 1%, we'll just add a little bit on the lips there as well. Then what we'll do is we'll go back to this shadow layer we created that sits underneath for the eye, and we'll go to our colors and we'll grab the middle color in that third column. Brush size around about 2%, and we'll just shadow underneath here, just creating a little bit of a shadow underneath those lips. And then we just need to go ahead and on the same layer, go to our colors and go to the yellow, the bottom of the second column, very small 1%. And then we're going to go ahead and just here, just reveal that lip line. Just a little something like this, just that tiny little bit on the bottom of the lips. And there we go, we've got our fish. Now we're going to add some extra texture to this as well. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new layer that's going to sit here just above our black lines, and we'll tap on it and we'll clipping mask it. We'll go to our colors and we're going to go ahead and make sure it's the middle color in that third column. Now your brush wants to be set to the option of materials, and we're going to use the old skin. I know it's not scales, but at the small scale that this is going to be, it actually doesn't look too bad for texture. So old skin under materials, the size is set to 61%, and we're just going to go ahead and coat the whole fish with this texture, more so towards sort of the body area. So if you go over it a few times, you'll get that lovely little bit of texture in there. And again, when you sort of zoom out, it can kind of look like scales, but just very sort of minimal. Now, at this point, again, I want to make sure that the design is matching the rest of the aesthetic. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and create another new layer once more, tap on it and clipping mask it to the fish itself. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to start to introduce some sort of just colors to bolden up some of the shapes and the lines. So top of the sixth column, brush wants to be set back to the option of inking and dry ink. And we're just going to add in some really simple sort of highlights. So like let's change the brush size back to 10%. We're going to add in a little bit of a sort of white bold line here because everything else is nicely bolded. So I'm going to introduce sort of a little bit of a white line along there. I'm going to go ahead and then introduce another sort of bright line up along the top edge there. I'm then going to go to my colors and switch it out to the middle color in the first column and then introduce like a little bit of blue along this sort of back edge. Now I'm just going to carry on this sort of white there, but into a little bit of blue. And then towards the underside, we're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the yellow, the bottom of the second column. And we'll introduce some additional tone underneath here. We'll then switch our color out to the orange at the middle of the second column. And again, we'll just introduce a little bit of a bold outline underneath there. A little bit more so under here too. And then I'm going to switch it back to the blue in the middle of that first column and just outline the edge here of that fin. And that's just going to help us sort of somewhat bring it back to the same style that we had before. Now, at this point, you are done with your fish. Congratulations. So at this point, you've got an option. You can go ahead and with this group, just hold down on the tick and it will turn off everything else. And you can turn off your background color. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to swipe with 3 fingers down and we're going to go to copy all. And we're going to swipe down with 3 fingers and go to paste. Now, what will have happened in your layers, you'll end up with a brand new fish on its own layer and you've still got your group as well. Now we can go ahead and bring in everything else. So if we hold down on the tick for the clownfish group, bring that in and just turn on the rest of it, including your background, you've now got this extra inserted fish. What we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to our cursor, we're going to uniform it down, and we're going to pop it in our scene. Now, what I also want you to go ahead and do is you can go to the option of warp and maybe flatten the fish down if you want to make it a little bit more streamlined, you know, just bring in the belly, vary it up a little bit, such as this, and then tap on your cursor when you're done. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to our layers. Now we need to go ahead and find the group that's got this area here, so it's just group number 4. And in group number 4, if we open it up fully, we've got the 2 sets, haven't we? We've got this front set and the back set of all this area here. We want to slot the fish in between. So we're going to grab it, we're going to drag it down, and we're going to put it here. Now it will clip itself, but we need to tap on it and we just want to unclip it. And you can just pop another fish just in there and you can grab your cursor again and then now uniform it, maybe even scale it down in size. Just position it how you want it, hide it in the scene. You can flip it horizontally if you wish. I am going to add another one up here, so maybe I will just sort of hide another one just in here and tap on my cursor when I'm done. I'm then going to go ahead and I'm going to go to my layers. We're going to go ahead and collapse group 4 down. We're going to go back up to our clownfish and we're going to swipe down with 3 fingers again. And we're going to go to the option of paste. We'll get another fish and we can scale it down in size. We can move it over here towards the right. We can probably scale this one right down, move it back in the scene like so. And again, we can warp it if we want to. We can just adjust it compared to the rest. I'm going to kind of do the same thing I did a second ago, but just try and distort it a little bit more. You can see there I've kind of focused on just sort of flattening the front end down a little bit, varying up the shapes in all the fish. Now this fish here, a little bit too bright, even though it's going to be way back in the scene. So we're going to go to our adjustments. We're going to go to the option of hue, saturation and brightness, and we're going to bring the saturation down. We're going to drop it down to around about sort of 25%, something around that mark, where it's going to start to be a little bit desaturated. It's going to be a little bit further back in our scene. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to our main clownfish. Now at this point, if you are concerned about your layers, simply tap on this group and flatten it down into one. But it's up to you. Otherwise, you can tap on the group, we can grab our cursor and we can flip it horizontally because I want it to actually face this way instead. I think this is a better looking design, and you can warp the design as well just to flatten your fish if you want to. I'm going to flatten it down. I made mine a little bit taller in the original mock-up. So I'm going to tap on my cursor when I'm done, and there we go. So now we've got our scene pretty much done, we're going to start to work on our final bit of lighting. So we're going to go ahead and in our layers, we're going to go ahead and I've turned off my guide. I'm going to create a new layer and I'm going to create another new layer and swipe from left to right on both and group them together, and we'll call this lighting. Once we've done that, we're going to go ahead and actually create a third layer in here. Now this top layer here, we're going to go to our colors and we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab a dark blue. So probably this one here in the bottom of that second column from the right. Your brush wants to be set to soft brush under airbrushing, and we're going to really try and focus our attention towards that center area. So you may lose a little bit of your design, but we're going to go ahead, for example, and just darken up around here. We're going to darken up the corner a little bit as well and come along here and just really sort of take away some of the color in the areas we're not too interested in. We're going to just bring that up here. I'm going to darken here as well, getting rid of just the top end of these and darken up here as well. Really, again, we want to focus our lighting in there. I'm going to maybe just sort of just darken up a tiny bit in there as well. Just, again, trying to focus our attention in this space. We're then going to go to our layers. We're going to go to the next layer down. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the one in the top right of the palette. We're going to go to our layer, change the blend mode from normal, and we're going to change it to the option of hard light. And we're going to carry on those light beams that we did before. So with an airbrush, probably around about sort of 6%. we're going to go ahead and just continue on these beams all the way down into sort of this area here. So we're going to go ahead and go along our fish, and we're going to follow those lines. And now our fish is going to somewhat be introduced into the scene properly. It's not floating on the top. I've just dropped the brush size down to about 4%, just so I can get some sort of thinner lines as well in here. And just trying to continue on some of these beautiful light beams that are coming across our scene, across our fish, and down onto here. And you can, if you want to, just sort of, you know, brighten up a tiny bit on these edges here with a little bit of extra lighting. And then I'm just going to introduce a bit of a brighter beam that just runs through here too. So really introducing that fish into the scene, probably about an 8%. We can probably run some more straight lines across. Don't overdo this. Then go to your layers and go down a layer to the next one and change the blend mode from normal and change it to add. And we're going to go ahead and kind of blow out the highlights a little bit in the top left here of the scene. So we're going to go with our brush, probably around about sort of 24%, just in a circular motion, just really brighten this up. And you will start to see it actually blow out a little bit too much. You'll see this kind of rim effect here. So we will just have to go to the layer, we'll drop it down a little bit. We'll drop it down to around about sort of 60%. That's dependent on how much pressure you add. We're just going to brighten this area up, really showing how sort of where that lighting is coming from. It's such a bright light source, and the contrast now in the whole design has really stepped up. Then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go above all of these layers in our lighting group and create another new layer. We're going to swipe down with 3 fingers and go to the option of copy all, and then we're going to swipe down with 3 fingers and go to the option of paste. What that will have done is that will have copied your entire design and put it on one brand new layer. We're going to go straight up to our adjustments. We're going to go to Gaussian blur, and we're going to swipe from left to right. We're going to blur this out up to about sort of 10% here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go to our layer, change the blend mode. We're going to change it to the option of lighter color. And immediately you'll get this kind of like you're looking at it through the water effects. And you can turn this on and off. It's totally up to you if you want to keep it or not. I love it. I think it just really looks like it's underwater. You've got that kind of murky look to it. You can go back and lower the percentage if you want. Maybe you can drop it to 8% potentially with the Gaussian blur. And then the final step is to create one more new layer, change the blend mode again from normal and change it to the option of add. We're going to go ahead and with a soft airbrush around about sort of 5% probably, just see what areas you may or may not want to sort of brighten up a little bit. I'm going to drop it down to 3. And I'm just going to, for example, here, brighten up the odd random little area here, just to really emphasize these areas, how bright they are here in our sort of sun that's beaming through. In the back here, you could also go ahead and maybe with like a 2%, if not slightly smaller than that, like a 2 or 1, just get in here and brighten up some of the tops of these just to change them up a little bit. I'm going to go up to about a 2% there and just try and brighten up some of the ones that are in our lighting. Just the tip of them, just a few of them, just to add in some additional lighting. I think that's fantastic. And the other options you can also do is, you know, anything on the fish that you may or may not want to brighten up. For example, you may want to brighten up the top. I wouldn't overdo it. The fish looks pretty good as it is. And if we go ahead and we pinch with 2 fingers, we go full screen with 4, we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed this design, a little bit of a longer one, and massive congratulations to you if you've completed it all the way through. As always, please be sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram. If you mention me, I might not see them, but if you tag me, I'm guaranteed to see them in my feed. So be sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram. Make sure to also share your final designs with me in my Discord as well. Both will be linked in the description down below. And if you want to get even more tutorials from me, you can come and join me over on Patreon, where patrons get access to a catalogue of over 80 exclusive tutorials at the time of recording, with 3 added every single month. You can get access to that full exclusive catalogue, have your name featured in videos, get sneak peeks of what's to come on the YouTube channel and Patreon, and much, much more. So hit the link in the description down below and come and show your support. And if you like this video, you'll probably like this one here on YouTube. So be sure to drop a like on the video down below, drop a comment, let me know what you thought of it. And with all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.